The enigmatic dwelling. My colleague and I were assigned to a specialized unit within the sheriff's department that dealt with monitoring individuals through ankle tethers. One night we were tracking down someone who had violated their monitoring program, leading us to a questionable area in our county. While our job seldom had routine stops, this one felt unsettling from the very start. My partner approached the front door, while I kept watch on the side of the house. After knocking on the door, we heard movement inside just before a middle-aged woman cautiously peered out at us. It was odd how she seemed to look directly at me, even though I wasn't visible from any window at the front or side of the house. Most people would typically address the person at the front door first. Eventually, she allowed us inside after we inquired about Camille, the person we were searching for. Her response was somewhat incoherent, hinting that she knew something about Camille. Things took a rapid turn as she suddenly dropped to her hands and knees, moving across the floor and desperately calling for Camille. It was clear that this woman had significant mental health issues, and we suspected Camille might have been her caretaker. As we cautiously searched the house, the woman kept following us on the ground, never standing back up. The layout of the house seemed inexplicably odd. It felt like I'd enter a different part of the house whenever I exited a room. We attempted to access the upstairs, expecting typical bedrooms or a bathroom. However, the door resisted at first, giving the impression it had been sealed shut, with paint dried in the seams. Upon finally opening it, we were greeted by an attic, not the expected bedrooms. There was an eerie atmosphere in the house, reminiscent of scenes from Paranormal Activity. Despite finding nothing substantial, the woman remained fixated, occasionally yelling for Camille. As we wrapped up and left, the woman stood by the door, staring at us. Strangely, although the clock suggested we were there for only 20 minutes, it felt like we had spent well over an hour in that inexplicable place. The whole experience was unsettling, from the late hour to the woman calling for Camille, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, and her haunting gaze as we departed. Needless to say, we never went back to that house. The haunting night. I work as a police officer in southern Jersey, a job I've held since I was 23. Despite what you might see on TV, it's not always as thrilling as it's made out to be. Not much happens in my county. Usually, the most common calls are for disturbances or the occasional shoplifting, with something more serious happening once in a blue moon. Over the years, I've experienced every possible shift. From the quiet night shifts to the bustling day shifts, each had its unique encounters. One particular night on the night shift stood out, void of any calls. As I drove along a desolate road, flanked by woods and devoid of streetlights, I spotted a reflection of taillights suddenly approaching on the right side of the road. As I drew closer, I noticed the driver's side door was ajar. My instincts kicked in, and I veered onto the grass, intending to offer assistance. Just as I approached the car, someone emerged and darted into the nearby woods. Alert, I radioed a suspicious person or vehicle report, positioning myself cautiously with my flashlight in hand and hand on my holster. Approaching the car, I peered inside, half expecting to find another person, but the car was vacant, emanating a putrid, rotting stench. I called out into the woods, inquiring if anyone needed help, waving my flashlight cautiously. Returning to the car, I inspected the passenger side. Bloody tissues and paper towels were strewn on the floor, and rear seats drenched in dark red. Startled, I heard footsteps in the woods, and I swiftly turned, yelling at the hidden figure. The situation grew more sinister as I found a blood-soaked package under the rear seats. Unwrapping it with caution, I discovered a severed hand, sending a chill down my spine. My radio call escalated to a possible murder, urgently requesting backup. Backup arrived, and we combed the woods, searching for any signs. The stolen vehicle was reported by a resident, baffled about the theft. Fingerprint and DNA analysis turned up no matches, leaving the mystery of the driver and the severed hand unsolved to this day. Whispers in the dark. One evening, I responded to a call about a possible disturbance. A young woman living alone was frightened after finding a broken window downstairs. She couldn't find anyone inside but thought she heard footsteps moving around. Her call suddenly disconnected, and she wouldn't respond to any attempted callbacks. I arrived at her house and knocked on the front door, trying to make contact. After multiple attempts with no response, I decided to inspect the house. The broken window was evidence of a possible break-in. I entered through the window, my heart racing, not knowing what I might encounter. The smell inside the house was unpleasant, and the dim light revealed a messy living room and kitchen. I announced my presence as a police officer and cautiously proceeded through the house. I called out, but there was no answer. The eerie silence made the situation even more unnerving. I reached the stairs and continued my search, footsteps echoing through the empty house. As I approached a bedroom, I heard a soft voice. A woman was sitting up in her bed, visibly distressed. I asked if she was okay, and she replied softly, her fear palpable. Something felt off. I sensed there was someone else in the room. Carefully, I gestured toward a closet, and she shook her head no. I then pointed towards under the bed, and she confirmed my suspicion, shaking her head, yes. The weight of the situation was heavy, but I had to act. I asked her to sign a form, pretending that everything was normal. She complied, and as she approached me, I pushed her safely out of the room. I drew my gun, demanding the intruder to surrender. A middle-aged man emerged from under the bed, hands up in surrender. I quickly apprehended him and led him outside, where fellow officers had arrived. It turned out the intruder had intended harm, and swift action prevented a potential tragedy.